Hi, my name is Giselle Wellman from Pacific Standard in San Diego, Top Chef Season 13. You're here listening to Shawn Rosler from Coarse Grind Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is episode number 61 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. Counting jokes, I've run out of them. After a bit of a break in the action, we are back, rested and inspired. And if you've listened in the relatively recent past, you know one of the sources, more recent anyway, of this inspiration is California, specifically from Santa Barbara up on through Napa. Setting aside the loving gesture that planning such a trip was by my incredible wife, I'm still vibrating culinarily from the insanely positive, forward-thinking culinary culture, and this, of course, includes beverages, because let's be fair, why not? Speaking of, one of our first stops was in a little town called Lompoc, left one of the strongest impressions of the entire trip, and I just happen to have one of the minds behind them here this evening. The owners and winemakers of Montemar Wineries started making wine in their garage in 1991, sourcing fruit from Santa Barbara County to Napa and making upwards of 14 barrels a year. As garagistes, I love that term, the activity was a friends and family experience that led to becoming a bonded winery in 2009. In 2012, production was increased, allowing for sufficient volume, approximately 1,400 cases a year, for a tasting room. The tasting room opened in 2013, and Montemar built their own winery in time to harvest the 2015 fruit. Both the tasting room and winery are located in the Lompoc Wine Ghetto. Folks, if you think a ghetto is always bad, trust me, you want to find this ghetto. Believing that great wine is made in the vineyard, a significant amount of energy is focused just there by Montemar. They source all its fruit from top vineyards in Santa Barbara County by leasing specific blocks and controlling all aspects of farming. They have been doing this for quite some time, and some of the vineyard blocks have been under their control for over 15 years. As a vineyard-driven winery, the winemaking process is very meticulous, but does not vary widely within varietal, so the distinctiveness of each wine is attributable to the vineyard, source, and year. Montemar currently produces 1,400 cases, again a year in total, averaging less than 100 cases per lot, with many small lot bottlings available exclusively to Wine Club members. Now, I know what you're thinking. With all this said, who the hell is Montemar? Well, wonder no more, as we've got one half of the formula here with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, my guest this evening, co-owner of Montemar Wineries in Lompoc, more specifically, the Lompoc Wine Ghetto, Mr. Stephen Arrowood. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be on your show.
Thank you, man. I can't tell you what an absolute thrill it was. I had to turn 40 for this to happen, so it hurts a little bit to that end, but to fly into Santa Barbara Airport, first of all, and then to end up coming into Buellton and then out to Lompoc was just stellar. And yours, sir, certainly sticks out as one of the high points of the trip, but more on that in just a minute. Folks new to the program, folks with garbage short-term memories like myself, starters, mains, afters, we're going to talk to the guest about what brought them to where they're at. The mains, we're going to talk about where they're at. And the afters, we're going to talk about where they're going in a little more off-the-cuff material, but no one's been injured in 60 episodes, so I don't foresee that happening now. So without further ado, Steve Arrowood, tell me about where and what you grew up eating and drinking.
Well, that's interesting. My parents did not drink, and I was born in 59, so I grew up in California. And basically, we ate kind of my parents weren't into food either.
Right.
So we ate a lot of cereal for breakfast, peanut butter and jelly.
Yep.
Kind of standard stuff, kind of for just a lot of people back in the 60s and 70s.
Sure.
And, what happened, the food and wine thing for me happened when we kind of got into wine a little bit before we really got into food. My wife and I, we got hooked up pretty young in our life, and in our early 20s we were into wine. 20s that are very knowledgeable about wine. But back when I was in my early 20s, that was kind of unusual.
Yeah.
And so we met up through wine things with older people who had cellars, and they had more experience than us. And that's how we kind of started, through wine.
Right on. So that would have put you like late 70s, early 80s, getting on the wine train. Correct my math if I'm wrong.
In the kind of the mid 80s.
Okay. Yep. And the only reason I bring that up, and I'm sure being the wine guy that you are, my dad was a manager of a state store here in Pennsylvania for 30 years, and that's when the big Riuniti boom started hitting. Isn't that correct? I mean, that certainly made it accessible to the layperson.
Probably, but luckily for me, we a lot of people kind of wander into wine, and sometimes people, they enjoy wine a lot, and it might not be a really good wine, but they really are enjoying it.
Sure.
And sometimes they never move from, say, a $5 wine, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people move up and they're into really great wines, and some people go there fast, or some people go there relatively, on a normal pace.
Mm-hmm.
We went from 0 to 60 in really a year and a half.
Yeah. Because
of the people that we were hanging out with.
Sure.
And, for a lot of people, once you taste great wine, you can't go backwards. So I've never actually drank Riuniti, and a lot of these kind of the big wines of the time, I never even drank them. We were already into, really, really good small lot production wines by 85.
That's awesome. Yeah, because there was such an influx of it. And the only reason I remember, I don't want you to think that, here I am hawking on, Gallo or Riuniti and then showing up at Montemar. I used to help my dad stock the shelves, and I was always like, man, these, there's just a lot of it, and it moves quick. But now knowing what I know, and certainly tasting what I've tasted, you pegged it right on the head perfectly, Steve. Since coming back from California, we're even more spoiled than we were. I mean, we were drinking what we would consider solid wines to begin with, but man, you come out there, I can't plug the tourism part of it enough. It is a completely different landscape, quite literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm there. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles area, but I went to school up in the Central Coast, and it's a great place to visit. It's the best part of California, and there's not really that many people there.
That was the part too. We were floored because, and this is not to disparage Napa at all, but it was, even going from Sonoma to Napa, there was a difference. But when we got to the end of the trip, when we got up to San Fran and we were flying out, we were kind of reflecting on it, and I'm like, man, Buellton, Lompoc, that's where it was at.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it kind of depends what you like.
Right.
Some people like to be in the middle of everything.
Yep.
And Napa's like going to Times Square. It's
that's
like going
exactly
to New York
right.
City.
Yep.
And it has the super famous places. And those super famous places have 5,000 people trying to see them in one day.
Sure.
Lines and buses and this stuff. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the world as well. There's a lot of beautiful places in Napa. It's quite beautiful. Mm-hmm. But for me, I'm the kind of person that any place is better looking if there's nobody there.
I agree. I'm right there with you. When we pulled into that wine ghetto, and again, I love that name now. That's a fantastic name. It really is like nestled in. We weren't sure if we found it, but then we started stumbling into places. And what's the bubbly goat or something? It's the one that does champagne. Flying goat. We walked out of there with a jar of the lady's jam she makes. It was so personal and so touching, really. I mean, I've been doing this show now for 4 going on 5 years. And, like, that's the element I've always wanted to bring out. Like, cool, we went to Montemar. Like, I walked out of there, and I think I said to your wife, Karen, I said, I need to talk to you guys. I want you guys on the show because it felt so just intimate. And that's the beauty of the area, I think, anyway, as the outsider.
Yeah, it's quite unusual because by many, many standards, Lompoc has about 30 wineries, roughly 30 to 40, depending how you count them. But about 90% of them are owner and winemaker, same person. In Napa, the owner winemakers, there's a lot of them by number. There's probably, 10 or 15% of the wineries might be owner winemaker. But of the production there's probably 1%. And these owner winemaker ones typically, you can have a great experience there if you're able to find it.
Right.
But in Lompoc, it's everywhere, and there's no one else looking for that experience at the same time. It's off the beaten track.
Sure.
We do get we're famous. We get a lot of traffic, but we don't get the hordes of crowds that you'll find in Paso, Sonoma, Napa, and then you get to take. The more the crowds come, the less the winemakers will be anywhere around.
Exactly.
And they might come in for like a 10-minute book signing or like sign bottles on Tuesday afternoon or something. But it tend to not be around because it's difficult. I mean, it'd be like, winemakers are just regular people. But, when you're making wine, a lot of times other people feel like you're a little bit like a star.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't never feel like a star myself. But, I mean, people, they want to take pictures via sign bottles, which is cool.
Yeah.
I enjoy it because I was one of those people, and I still am. I am a consumer first and a winemaker second.
For sure.
And so that's why it's nice in Lompoc because it's casual like that. There will be more intimate discussions with winemaker or the assistant winemaker. Yeah.
I mean, we honestly, we could have spent the entire week there, and I think walked away as happy. I think we only put a little nick in the surface of what we want to come back to do.
Oh yeah,
without a doubt.
I think anybody thinking about going to a wine trip in America, I can't really think of a better place in Santa Barbara County.
No, absolutely not.
Week. It's cheaper than Napa and Sonoma by far.
Mm-hmm.
It's more accessible. You don't have to have any plans to have a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need reservations.
Mm-hmm.
The weather's great, because you're close to the ocean. I mean, Napa can be 105 degrees.
Ooh, no thanks. No
yeah,
thanks.
Napa is great. It's warm. It's a monoclimate for Cabernet, mostly.
Sure.
You have Caneros at the bottom. I mean, I like Napa, but I don't go there anymore because it's like a lot of my friends will say, Napa's so famous, nobody goes there anymore.
True.
And so it's still got most of the people, but a lot of people will be going to other places.
Right. Well, I even noticed the difference between Sonoma and Napa. Sonoma was even more reasonable.
Sonoma is so much more spread out. That you can find edges of Sonoma and ebbs and flows, and it just it's like 20 years behind Napa, anyways.
Sure. Well,
and I think it grew up as wanting to be like the anti-Napa. So even though it's so wildly successful and traveled,
right.
They still want to be less Napa-ish.
Yeah, it's like the punk Napa. I like it.
Yeah.
So tell me. When it was, I mean, obviously, having tasted your wares, like I have the guilty advantage to everybody listening that I was there, I tasted it, we walked out with a box with, I forget how many bottles my wife bought. I say my wife, I had a hand in it. I think 4 or 5 to probably undersell it. But when was it, Steve, that you clicked, that you knew I want to do this as a thing? I think I read in that one online interview, they asked you, do you still have a day job? And you're like, no. When was it that you made that happen, when you believed that?
Well, it was kind of interesting. We got into wine in the mid-'80s, and we were traveling extensively internationally as well. And this is back in the 80s, local food, locavores, farm to table. These things didn't exist in America. I mean, I don't even think Chez Panisse, where it all started, was even open yet, but it might have been. That was pretty much where it started in America. But in Europe, there wasn't a concept. That's just how they do it. And that blew us away. And we really loved that part of it. And before it was a big trend, there were a lot of people that were doing it, and a lot of wine people were doing it because they would be traveling to wine places where there was food, and then they only eat local food and this kind of thing. So that food thing got us going, got us supercharged. And so I was like, I want to make wine. I decided I wanted to make wine in 91, but it wasn't like I want to make wine to drink, or I want to become a winemaker, or I want to get into the wine business. It was like, you know what? I want to see, kind of a do-it-yourselfer in a lot of ways. I want to see if I can turn grapes into wine. That's what I want to do, an experiment. Because at the time, in 91, you can buy Caymus Cab for $11. And we had cases of that, and a case of this, and a case of that, and a case of this. But Napa Cab, good Napa Cab was $11. Mm-hmm. And so everything else was a little bit cheaper, right? So we weren't trying to reduce our wine budget, even though $11 in 91 was a lot of money for a bottle of wine.
Sure.
It sounds super cheap by today's standards, but it still wasn't a lot of money, and it wasn't worth trying to make wine to try to save wine budget money, because I'd never in my wildest imagination thought I could make good wine. I was just trying to do an experiment, and it turned out that me and a friend were able to turn grapes into wine, and the wine was drinkable. That was it. And he moved to Texas, but in the process, I kind of got fascinated by it, and this was my little problem. I'm a little bit addictive to some certain things, and so I was like, I want to come up with a plan and really make some good wine, get into this thing as my little side hobby at home. Mm-hmm. And so my plan was basically get together 50 of my closest friends for the funding. Mm-hmm. Everybody puts in, at the beginning was $500.
Sure.
And then we split the wine, we make 50 ways, and we have, most people were couples, but not all. So we have an email list, and then people would come to do the work. And that's how we started. And then within 3 years, I was at 12 barrels in the garage. And the garage was air conditioned, and we were upgrading all of our equipment and our grapes and our barrels and our knowledge. And we started making pretty decent wine, by like 96. So about 5 years of practice, which really decent wine. We were making decent wine. We were making very good wine by 96, and we were making decent wine by like the second year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. So what it was like, I always kind of said to myself to try to control my because we had a good job. We both had good jobs in Los Angeles, and really, at the time, there was no real concept of an urban winery, although now it's a big deal.
Right.
I was like, I don't really want to go and become an official winemaker, because I am an official winemaker in my garage, and I get to do it my way. I don't have, federal laws. I don't have sales. I don't have sales tax. I'm not making money. I wasn't trying to make money. This was a break-even thing. So I was having all the bennies and none of the headaches.
Right.
And so we did it for 24 years in the garage while I had a day job. And so I never really officially quit my day job to go become a winemaker. I just finished my day job by retiring.
Got it.
And so when I retired, I wasn't planning to do what I did right now. I kind of fell into it. It was my first summer that I was off. I told my wife I was going to go up to Santa Barbara full-time for the whole harvest. And at that time, I already had a to restaurants at this point, making a little bit of money, making probably 500 cases a year, selling in 09, 10, and 11. And then in 12, after retiring, it turned out I made a little bit more wine. I had a lot more fun.
Sure.
I hung out with a lot of really good winemakers that convinced me that I should open a tasting room and go for it.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And timestamp that again for me, just so I'm getting the timeline of it.
Yeah, that was 2012.
2012. Okay, so that makes sense. So I mean, this is if we're gonna put the flag in the early '80s as the start of your journey. I mean, you make it sound very quick, but it was truly a 30-year journey to get to this deep, enamored vibe that you have for the fruit of the vine. Not to be corny about it, but you know, really it is. It's a miraculous thing to hear. And the one thing that I got introduced to out there, and maybe you can help explain it to folks, explain it to me for that matter, because I'm half stupid anyway. There's a lot of sharing in vineyards that I wasn't aware of. Like, I thought, here's a vineyard, these people own it, and that's it. But there can be a lot of wineries in a vineyard. Is that true?
Yeah, a lot of vineyards are actually owned, and they don't make wine. The owners don't make wine. They sell all the vineyard, and so a 100-acre vineyard could have as many as 30 or 40 winemakers buying fruit, and if it's a great vineyard, they're all going to probably vineyard designated. When you're in a great area, like Santa Rita Hills is a really great area, the grapes are very expensive, and so a lot of the vineyards there, people want to let you know what's in the wine because you know it's just a great vineyard. It's like if you're going to have a steak and it's Kobe, you're going to tell people this is Kobe.
Right. And now so, there's rules about that too. This is also something I learned. You can't just go and call something a fill in the region here Cabernet unless I'm gonna ballpark a percentage. I'm gonna be wrong, but like 80% of the grapes come from that region. Is that true?
Yes, it's not 80. I believe it's 85.
Damn, I was close. Okay.
which, by the way, like in our area, everyone in the ghetto that makes a Santa Rita Hills Pinot, it's 100% Santa Rita Hills.
Right.
85 is so that 85 allows Gallo or big companies to go pour 15% cheap stuff into it and sell it as this or that or the other thing. No boutique wineries would ever come up with 85%. Right. Like, well, what are you going to put the rest of the stuff are you going to put in there?
Right.
It's the wine rules are made up for the big companies. For
the big boys. Yeah, and I found that as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, there's the Senna bullshit. That's where you're trying to get the big guys, the E.J. Gallos, all those guys onto the table so that they can cut it, they can cut more profit and so on. Because none of the boutiques. Yeah.
This is sugar, 85, or this is Parmesan cheese with 15% sawdust in it.
That's right.
This is what they do. We get sawdust in our Parmesan cheese, and the big producers, they allow that, and it's the same in the wine business. So this is what you have to look out for and when you buy wine. Now, if somebody makes a Napa Cab and slides 15% Sonoma in it, I mean, hey, if it tastes good, that's fine.
Right.
But they're that's not normally what they're doing.
Right.
They're putting Central Valley stuff in it, or like there's a county above Napa, Lake County, where the grapes are 1/5 the price. That's where they go up and get grapes 1/5 the price and put them in there. And 15% doesn't sound like much, but when you're making a million cases,
right,
it's a lot when you can cut the price that much.
Exactly. So you heard it here, people. Be aware. Pay the extra $5-10. I paid. I'll throw myself out there. At 40 years old, I paid more for bottles of wine in California than I have probably mostly anywhere else in my life, and yet, holy shit, will I continue doing that? No question. Absolutely no question, because truly, for as wizened as I thought I was, there's just something to the absolute boutique quality, like you said, Steve, of 100% whatever it is you're going for.
Yeah. I mean, I recommend people when they get into it to know their producers. There's tons of great producers. They're in California, they're in Oregon, they're in Washington, they're over around in other countries. Small producers, handcrafting wine, this is what you want, because you have that percentage thing is the least of the problems, really, because it's the fact that wine, I don't want to dwell on this, but wine bottles are the only thing you can go in the grocery store, food product, that doesn't have the ingredients on the label.
Right.
You go buy salt, and it tells you that there's salt in that.
Sure.
And water tells you it's water. But wine doesn't tell you, because if you bought a $2 chuck or a $5 wine at the store, there would be more than, well, first of all, they don't even know what's in it, because they bought it from 400 people and blended it all together.
Right.
But if they did know, and they did make it in one batch, it would have at least 50 things in it.
Right.
But anyways, I don't want to dwell on that, but the small producers, it can be expensive. I mean, but usually they're buying really super high quality grapes. I mean, in the bottle of my Pinot, $6,000 for grapes, and $2 chuck is $20 a ton. I $6,000 a ton. At the lowest end, it's $20 a ton. It's probably $100 a ton at $5, and $15 is probably $500 a ton.
Man.
So there's a lot of cost in there. A lot of people think it's marketing, and there is some marketing cost in certain, especially when a wine gets super popular and becomes a cult wine, of course.
Sure. Wow. And that's, here again, folks listening, you have no idea the education. Again, I went out as I just turned approximately 4 years this culinary podcast host, and I thought my shit didn't stink. I thought I had my stuff in line. It took me 2 days to realize how undereducated I was on the matter. And this is why wine is such a thing. It is so miraculous, so beautiful, so varietal. So when you're making these beautiful, beautiful wines, Steve, I can't say that enough, where do you pull from to make them your own? Do you have like an inspiration you go to? Is it just the love of the vine? What is it that makes you want to create these the way you do?
Well, I have a lot of inspirations. Each varietal that I make has its own kind of subsets of inspiration. When I started making wine in '91, we like I said, we were traveling a lot around California and all over the world. And once I started making wine, I narrowed my focus talking to winemakers. Before that, I talked to them about everything and was gobbling up whatever I could learn and take tours and gobble. And my brain liked winemaking, so it just all fit in there, and I gained a lot of understanding. Well, when I started making wine, not only did I do some weekend classes, and I also read a lot of books, and I read a lot of magazines. But when I would go to the wine countries, I'd talk to winemakers, and I would talk to them about one thing. I'd take each weekend that we went, I would say, okay, this weekend we're going to talk about corks, only corks. That way, I'm not going to bore the daylights out of the winemaker with 1,000 questions.
Sure.
Which I did have, but I would just go like, why do you pick your cork? How do you pick your cork? What's important about cork? And cork is a topic that isn't very deep, so it only really takes one weekend, and you can become pretty expert on cork. Topping. What do you do for topping? When do you pick? How do you pick your barrels? How long do you put it in the barrels? Do you rack it? Do you do this? What yeast do you use? Each one was a 1 weekend deep dive with 10 or 15 winemakers. So I would slice it that way, which was cut across all varietals. But then I also had inspirations for individual varietals from Burgundy, like Pinot Noir came from a lot of Burgundian producers, but also a lot of California William Sellium, talking to William Sellium people. Sometimes a 5-minute conversation with a guy that you've had a lot of wine from, but you have a 5-minute conversation with him, and you kind of get a sense of how he makes it. It could be more impactful than another one that could be like just like a half-hour conversation with another famous guy, but it just seems like the 5-minute one was more impactful.
Definitely.
I don't really have any singular inspirations. I have just a huge potpourri of them.
Sure. And I mean, that's. I think to even try to begin to point a finger at an inspiration at a one single thing when tasting what we did, and we tasted a plenty. That would be insanely hard. Now, I have to ask, for as lengthy a stay as you've had in winemaking, what has been, and this will obviously be probably based on year, I'd assume, I don't know for sure, but what has been your greatest creation? Like, is there one year, one type that sticks out to you more than any?
Nope. It's a good question, but and I get that question all the time. Like, what's your favorite wine?
Right.
We're really lucky. Since I started making wine professionally, which means that I have a bond and I can sell it, and the government's really interested in making sure you pay your taxes. That's what it's a tax bond.
Sure.
Since I started in 2009, I mean, all the wines have been really incredible and super well received. And I'd have to think about wines that I wasn't really as happy and ecstatic with than others. Mm-hmm. And I can't even think of any of those offhand.
Well, I was going to say, can you flip that? Can you pick a worst case? Was there one you made and you said never again?
No, but there was one Pinot vineyard that I had. I won't mention the vineyard, and it was a little bit too straightforward, meaning it was really good fruit, nice fruit. It was smooth and but it wasn't as complex as I'd like, and it wasn't as bright as I'd like.
Gotcha.
And to me, it was kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, boring in the context of the great Pinots that I'm trying to make, and I'm getting really incredibly great wine, great vineyards. It's almost difficult not to make a pretty great wine from the vineyards I'm getting.
Sure.
So this vineyard was like, so I used it in my blend, and a lot of people, when I barrel tasted it, it was their favorite wine. I was like, really? And so I decided to bottle a separate one, and it sold really quickly. It didn't sell out the fastest one, but it sold real quickly, and for a subset of the people, this was their most favorite wine. And so, the thing is, everybody has their own flavor profile for each varietal. They might like a little bit more of this or less of that, or this and that and the thing. And that one just taught me that, it's just, even if I don't exactly, if it's not my favorite, it could be somebody else's favorite. It wasn't had any flaws in it or anything. It was just the character of the vineyard was a little bit too feminine and too fruit-driven for me.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about wine that, I think food you can draw a pretty stark line and say good, not good, but wine is so subjective. One person's good is another person's too dry, or, fill in the blank or whatever.
Yeah. As long as it's well made, and clean, or clean enough to be well made. Some wines have some funk in them, but it's not a negative. I don't really like funk in wines, and definitely not in my own wines, but which other people do. But yeah, it's so one thing I did get. I think my main inspiration was simplicity across all my the wines that I loved and got inspiration from across the planet, and care in the vineyard and the vineyard source.
Love it.
So the vineyard is where we spend the most of the time. wine, as I say, the wine is made in the vineyard. I mean, obviously it's not made in the vineyard, but the point is that if you I don't really, you've never even rated our wines actually, but if you use a wine rating and you have 100-point wine, well, it was a 100-point wine on the vine, and the winemaker was able to deliver it into the bottle at 100 points. If it's 99 points on the vine, it can't be 100 in the bottle.
Right.
You can't make it better. And
wow.
So that's what you do. You try to get it there, and then obviously 100-point grape on the vine, if you give it to 10 different winemakers and they all make a great wine, is going to taste different.
Sure.
Even if they've told how to make it very specifically, there's so many little nuances related to winemaking that are not controllable. I mean, they're not controllable unless you go down to like 1,000 detailed steps. This is one reason why I actually love watching things like Chef's Table.
Yeah.
You know that show?
I do, yes.
Yeah, getting really into chefs. Chefs actually are some of my biggest influencers, because insane chefs like Thomas Keller and some of these sushi guys who are looking at how to slice this fish perfectly, and they're like, okay, practice that for 10 years, type of thing.
Yep.
Where in Thomas Keller, he actually has a specification that he hands the fish people on how to catch the fish. It's insane.
That's
but
crazy.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So when you're punching down wine, you're just punching down wine, there's a million ways to punch down wine. You could do it. You can you can hurt wine, or you can go slowly. You can do a lot of stuff, and you just can't. Like, okay, punch down twice a day for 5 minutes. This is what you would tell the winemakers. Okay, we want to punch down this wine instead of pump it over. This is 2 ways to get the cap wet, but the wine will be different just because of the way people punch it down. So I'm a key. I pay attention to all these little details because we don't make a lot of wine. 1,400 cases, 20 tons of wine a year. It's not a lot on purpose. Organized. It's because I am retired, right, and I don't want to work full time. I mean, I do work full time, but I don't want to be busy all the time.
No, I hear that.
And the more wine you make, the more wine you have to sell.
Right.
And the only reason to do it is to make more money. Well, I love money, but I also don't want to be on the treadmill all day long after I already worked a whole job for my whole life to make enough money just to kind of kick back a little bit.
Sure.
So the good news for customers is when everyone's rushing around and trying to cut costs to make more money, this is not good for the customer.
No. Nope.
So you want somebody that can take the time and effort and at an affordable price and make a perfect wine.
Absolutely.
I mean, not that I make a perfect wine. I mean, but make a wine as perfect as they can try to do it.
I don't know. I might actually disagree with that statement, Steve. I'm not going to lie. And it's, I've already got you on the show, so I don't have to blow any smoke up your ass. But, your wines are as spot on as I can imagine them to be. And it's truly, truly miraculous. Now let me ask you, let me pick your, oenological brain here again. Is there something new and exciting for wine lovers that we should know about? Is there like something new emerging out of it? I know it's such an old process, and yet we always find new things to be excited about. Is there something coming down the pipe that we should know about?
Well, there's always something coming down. There's always something new, and it's driven by two elements drive the new stuff. You have inquisitive winemakers that are wanting to play around, experiment with new things for them. And they could be entirely new things, period, or they could be old things that no one does anymore. I mean, to the wine business for new little innovative things. You'll find stuff. And then there's other things that are driven more by marketing. Like, we need something new here. Like, there's a new thing. I'll take an example of what I call a marketing new thing, which I have 2 MBAs in marketing, but I hate to be marketed to. And so I don't like wine marketing. I don't like any kind of marketing, actually. I mean, any kind of, like, sales, heavy sales stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But there's this wine coming out in Spain that's supposed to be all the rage. It's blue. The wine actually pours in your glass blue, and they think that a lot of people will like that. And you know what? More power to them. It's not for me.
Yeah.
But this is a marketing new thing. Okay. Another new thing that I'm looking into, and I plan to do it this year, is really an old thing. It's called Black Chardonnay. And what happened was in the time of the 80s and 90s, there was the Davis thing pushing and for cleanliness and winemaking and for making cleaner wines and not oxidizing wines. They want to keep air away from wine. Mm-hmm. And they would do everything to keep air away, especially white wines are very oxidative. And so, they would press inside with nitrogen so there wouldn't be oxygen during the press cycle. And so anyways, this is how most white wine is made, in a very much protected from oxygen environment. But a long time ago, they used to let the wine become very oxidized, let the grapes and the juice, before there was fermentation, become very oxidized. It would actually turn brown, and in some ways it would get even darker. They call it Black Chardonnay. And a couple guys in Burgundy started redoing it, putting it in. So there's a little experimentation going on with a lot of wineries in Burgundy, in Sonoma, probably in Santa Barbara somewhere, but I'm not sure, and also Oregon. At least 10 kind of somewhat famous places are doing it. Mm-hmm. And the idea is, when the wine gets oxidized in its juice phase, then when it goes through the fermentation, it goes back to the right color, but it has protection against being oxidized in its wine phase. Where if you don't have that protection, I guess, that comes by being oxidized in its youth, but shrugging it off, if it's always been protected the whole time, then the wine itself can become oxidized easier. And these winemakers have gone back to this process because they were unhappy that some of their wines prematurely oxidized in the bottle.
Sure. Wow.
So that's something I'm going to play around with this year on my Chardonnay, because I get to do whatever I want, and I don't make much of it.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's kind of like a fun outcropping, and I can't believe I've done enough of these shows. I shouldn't be as like sitting here with my head on top of my hands going, tell me more. But I'm literally enthralled at the possibilities, behind wine. And like I said, and I can't say it enough, flew out to California thinking I knew it all, came back realizing I don't know a damn thing. Blue wine and Black Chardonnay, that's on my list for sure. Is there anything in the wine market you're ready to see just go away? I mean, those are going to be like, some cool, fun things to kind of run with. Is there something that is popular that you wish just wasn't? Besides $5 Chuck.
Well, I don't mind $2 Chuck itself. I think it lowers the price of drinking wine for a lot of people, and people that want to drink $2 Chuck for the rest of their lives, this is cool. They're enjoying themselves. If you rate your experience on $2 Chuck and you're like, hey, how do you like it? Well, I like it. Well, 1 to 10, what do you think? It's a 7. It's a 7. Then you, it's not for me, it wouldn't be a 7, but people that drink it all the time, it's probably 7,
Right.
5 or 7, and then you go, well, listen, dude, I can get you a 10 experience, $50. It's $50. afford that too.
Right.
So I think Two Buck Chuck is great. It's a feeder. A lot of people move on from Two Buck Chuck, go to a 5, go to a 10, and as they get older and maybe have a little more money or they get more into it, they become wine geeks. Of course, I want more people to be into wine, but I want them to be into wine at their own pace, you know, and within their own budgets.
Yeah.
I would love for what I would call deceptive marketing to go away. I would love for there to be ingredients on wine labels, and it would be a bloodbath because once the ingredients come out, there'd be a couple shows on CNN or something, and they'd do a deep dive into what that list is to let the people know what's in there, and people would be going, "You got to be effing kidding me!"
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be able to sell that stuff. They had to drop it in half the price and change the whole way.
Absolutely.
They're making bulk wine.
They'd be using it to clean paint off walls, ultimately. Some of them, anyway.
Yeah.
Some of them, anyway.
Yeah, probably.
Right on.
That's one thing. The amount of people that come from big wine, either whether it's $20 or $50 big wine or $2 big wine, there's 3 companies that make about 80% of the wine, and Gallo. Each one of those companies could fill a 50-foot wall of wine with different brands, and not all of them are different. They just got different labels, but they're made. Many of them were made in the same factory, and they just put a little different food coloring in one or a little more tannin in another. So, people are already coming out of the big wine, and they come over slowly into the small wine, which is about 8,000 producers.
Right.
And I'm one of those guys. And most of those, not all 8,000 of those guys are making great wine, but thousands of them are. And that's where, if you can afford it, those are the kind of guys you should get to know, and then you know that you're getting wines made from grapes.
No doubt.
Which is a really good thing to have in your wine, which most people think you're getting, but generally probably not.
I was gonna say, isn't that the end game, Steve? Isn't that what we want?
It is, and it's easy to get with a little bit of knowledge.
Sure.
Because I'm definitely not the only one doing it. I've been inspired by in at least 200 or 300 different wineries that I've been to that are making just incredible wine.
Right on. Amazing.
I know a friend of mine across the way. He's a real experimenter. He made a barrel of Sauvignon Blanc by taking the Sauvignon Blanc berries and filling a barrel and putting the bung in it and letting it ferment on the skins.
What?
Yeah.
What happened?
It turned out to be a really crazy good wine. I mean, it was white wine made with a lot of skin contact. Had a lot different feel to it than a regular Sauvignon Blanc. It was really a luxuriant, beautiful wine.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So, these come into places like the Wine Ghetto and other places where there's, smaller owner-operator, artisanal people. If you went through and knew everything that was going on in the ghetto, and when I say the ghetto, this is like 25 or 30 wineries, there would be so many interesting little projects.
Oh my God! All the more reason we have to go back now. All the more reason we have to spend a week in Lompoc. Hands down.
You've heard of barrel stirring the leaves in a barrel?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a traditional way to make a Chardonnay. That you leave it on the leaves and then you stir these leaves. And if you've got really great fruit, the leaves will be clean, and they add a textural element to the wine.
Right.
Well, I don't know if you saw this in our winery, but we have the racks that have basically like 4 skateboard wheels that are what hold up the barrel. And so instead of stirring, we just roll the whole barrel. 360.
No, and you know what? We didn't get a chance to come back and really look. We were impressed as hell by your architecture there in the tasting room. The ceilings, remind me, Karen was telling us the story, but I was too busy drinking wine. Those ceilings were incredible.
Yeah, we had fun building that thing.
Oh.
We had that the wine barrel sealing. We chopped up 20 wine barrels and made a sealing out of it.
That's what it was. But you have those Chardonnay barrels on skateboard wheels.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a rack that's kind of custom made, and so instead of stirring the leaves, you really can do as much, more intense stirring. And we played around with some of the barrels where we'll stir a lot and play around with that, because then we're still in the process of deciding what to do with that wine, but we can always add it to a barrel that's less stirred.
Sure.
Or we can bottle it separately, or we can go like, this is super good, so we're going to stir the other barrel up a little bit more, catch up, and make this super stirred Chardonnay, and by the time we bottle it, we're going to bottle it where it'll be clear. When we bottle it, we won't bottle the leaves, but
right.
But we don't filter, so sometimes there's a teeny bit of sediment in our white wines, but but that's a fun little experiment we're doing.
Oh my God! It's only driving the spike deeper. Just the absolute and utter need to get back out there. So, I mean, that's where you were. That's where you're at. So speaking of the tasting room, speaking of your winery, let's move on to the afters. A little bit of off the cuff, irreverent questions. Again, no one's been injured in 60 episodes. Hopefully that doesn't happen tonight. If I'm standing in your winery, wherever it is you're doing just what it is you do, what music do I hear? What's your favorite music to get down wine style to?
Grateful Dead.
Nice.
I saw him on tour. I saw him on tour 7 times this tour.
Wow. My wife is a huge fan. I was never a fan, but my wife got me into him. And I gotta say, actually, were you playing Dead in the tasting room when we were there?
Probably not.
No. I thought that might have had a chance, but I'm not sure.
It could have been, but in the winery, see, I got my own speaker in the winery, and I crank it up.
Nice.
But I play a lot of Springsteen too. I play a lot of classic rock, and in the tasting room we play a lot of classic rock. But I like country. I like a lot of music.
Love it. Here's
And we also have bands playing in the backyard.
Yeah, that backyard, by the way, is just impressive as hell. I mean, just gorgeous. Don't you have the like industrial sized Jenga too, where it's like 2x4s?
Yep. Well, no, it's big. It's bigger than 2x4s.
Oh my God.
I hand cut those myself. They're 2x3. They're 2 inches tall, 3 inches wide.
Oh, shit. Wow. So if you're looking to fly out to California, you're not into wine, but you're into big Jenga, go see Montemar. That's where it's at, apparently. Hypothetical question, fictional question I love to play with. You're going to be stranded on a deserted island, and you can only bring 3 food or drinks with you. What would they be and why? Food type items, rather, and drinks. What would they be?
Unlimited part of amounts of each of them.
Yes. Yep. Infinite.
Food and drinks. I mean, I don't know. I think I might bring.
This might inadvertently answer the question of your favorite wine. I don't know.
I might bring steak. Hoping I would have a fire. And I'd probably bring a Pinot Noir. And I have 3 of them?
Yep, 3. So you got 1 more.
I don't know. Am I supposed to survive or just enjoy myself?
Dude, see, this is why I love your winery. I said steak, Hefeweizen, and bourbon. And my wife goes, "You're going to die of colon cancer." And I'm like, well, I'm stranded on an island, so what do you want from me?
Right. Yeah, probably. Oh, man. I don't know, maybe some ice cream.
Love it. Go with it. Have you ever had the chance to check out Melanie Denea's books, My Last Supper and The Next Course?
No.
Okay, so they're a coffee table book, a series. I mean, there's two of them, so I don't know. You call it a series, but in each one, there's 50 famous chefs, and they're all asked the same questions. Actually, the inspiration for the show kind of came from that, and
Nice.
it's all centered around you're checking out tomorrow. Your last meal's tonight. What would it be? Who would be there? What would you drink and why? And so, in a more serious moment than we've had, Steve, what would your last meal be?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. I think I would want to go to the San Sebastian and have a meal with that famous chef at the place that I think is closed, but I think they're going to reopen it. I'm not sure. Il Bulli.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to go there and just say, hook me up. You know, I like to eat everything, drink everything, and a friend of mine did that. And with the wine flight and everything, he just said, take care of me. I don't have a budget.
Right.
And he said it was the most credible meal of his life. And, you know, I really do. This is my favorite way to eat, actually, is when I'm at a really great restaurant, is just to say, you know, this is what I like.
Yep.
You know, maybe give them a little bit of what I like, but, you know, there's nothing I won't eat at all.
Oh, man.
I've been to 60 countries. I've eaten some weird stuff.
It was Ferran Adria.
What's that?
Chef Ferran Adria is the
That's
chef
the one.
from El Bulli.
Yeah.
And what's crazy about this is, dude, I've got to come back out again. We've got to drink together because for my, I want to say it was my 38th birthday, we went up to this restaurant in my hometown. I did the exact same thing. They came out. My wife proffered her order quickly, and I just looked at the waitress. I said, could you have chef come out, please? And, you know, had a confused look, and chef comes out. I said, just take care of me. Just let it happen.
Nice.
I don't want to think. I want to be cared for. I want to be, and honestly, for all the guests I've had on the show, you know, and you know, some of them, market chefs, like, their biggest cornerstone of what they do is caring, nurturing, like nourishing. And when you think of it that way, what other choice would you have but to walk in, especially to El Bulli, you know? And actually, Ferran Adria is in the first book of My Last Supper, not the next course, but Melanie Dinea's first book, and gives his answers. It truly, like, you just want to take that pressure off yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and I want to be, you know, surprised and delighted.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah,
no
you have to text me those two books so I don't have to write down the names, and I'll go and get them online and read them.
I will
You know,
absolutely do that. As soon as I
while we're on
hang
the
up,
book thing-
I'm going to text you those pictures for sure. And actually, I have a beer in my beer cellar crafted by Ferran Adria, which I'll have
Really?
to send you a picture of as well, for sure. For sure. But
Cool.
with one question left to go, the simplest question, but the most complex, what is food and drink to you in a single word?
Life.
Love it. Love it. You have no idea how many people have answered that and how much you share in common with them. You know, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Wholeheartedly, man. Life,
Yep.
indeed.
I mean, it's just life.
That
Hey,
answer
I'll
alone.
do a plug. Before I go, I'll give you a plug for a book I really enjoy.
Sure.
It's just kind of a fun book. It's a wine book. It's called Wine and War. And it was a kind of a journalistic thing where this couple was studying how the Germans were managing the French wine business during the occupation.
Yeah.
And then they wrote a novel around it with, you know, turned it into actual events that were based on facts, but they turned it into, you know, the daily lives of these people that were, you know, interacting with each other. And it's just a amazing story. And most of the wineries that are involved, they are still you know, operating.
Yeah. Wine and War, the French, the Nazis, and the Battle for France's Greatest Treasure. Published in 2002, Don Kladstrup and Petey Kladstrup, co-authors. Available on Amazon.com right now for $11.83.
Yeah, and if you get it used, you can get it for cheap. If you do buy it on Amazon, buy more than one because you're going to be handing them out to your friends.
I love it. I love it. Wine and War, you heard it here. Food and drink is life. Ladies and gentlemen, Montemar Wines. Do not miss this. Look them up on Facebook. At Twitter, they're at Montemar Wines. They're located at 1501 East Chestnut Court, Lompoc, California, 93436 805 735 5000 to get in touch with them. And Steve Arrowood, I cannot thank you enough, man. This has been an absolute education and a pleasure all at the same time.
All right, thanks a lot.
You got it, man. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode number 61 of the Coarse Grind Podcast. Again, my guest this evening has been Mr. Steve Arrowood of Montemar Wines. My producer, as always, has been the lovely Johnny Leland Robinson, a.k.a. the Reverend Johnny Lamoria. And next episode, number 62, did someone say mashup? I'm not sure. You'll have to tune in to find out. Take care.